Hello and welcome to the Outcast. I'm your host HC, and with me is.
Wolf.
And today we are going to toss a coin to your Witcher because we're talking about the new Netflix show, The Witcher, based on a book series by the same name and a video game series by the same name. So, before we start talking about the show, I guess it's only appropriate to talk about our history with the franchise because, it's based on something. And I'm going to go first because it's very short for me. I have no history with this. Like,
Fair.
I heard about the games, I heard about the books. I know they are very well respected. I am not debating it, and I also have a few friends who are fans of the game specifically, not
Hi.
necessarily the books. Yeah, with the exception of Wolf, obviously. But I have other friends than you. Shut up. But
Ow.
other, yeah. Well, how many times have you outed me? So yeah, payback.
Fair.
But anyway, this is something I'm familiar with, and I'm sure it's worth all of its praising. But I just didn't have time to, get into the previous medias. Not necessarily anything against it. Just I'm not much of a book person, and the games are massive to the point I don't really have the time and energy to put into them right now. But it is
Fair.
something I'm planning on trying at some point in the future. And I'm not going to let anything I say about the show affect me once I get to the game.
I think it'll be interesting though having you come in and talk about The Witcher as someone who about the show specifically as someone who has none of that experience, right? I think that'll be for an interesting though take, right?
That's
Because
part of the reason why I researched nothing before going into the show. I want to
fair
go in
enough.
as I want to go in as clean as possible to see what it can bring me as the show.
So I guess go into my experience. Well, my experience is that I have played the games and I have a passing knowledge of the books. For the game specifically, I played through all three of them, but I didn't complete or finish the first two. I personally just couldn't get into them. I did play through everything and complete everything for the third game. That one I got more into personally. I enjoyed it a lot more. The first two,
So would you
I
say
had
the
issues
third one
with.
is your favorite?
Yeah, I think most people would, but I would definitely say the third one was my favorite. Not perfect,
Okay.
mine, but I enjoyed it a lot more than the first two. The first two can be, in my opinion, harder to get into, and I just couldn't get into them personally as well as I could the third one.
I just saw a January sale on the PlayStation Store for the third game. Yeah, I might jump on it,
The third
but we'll
one's
see.
a lot more enjoyable, especially the one of the expansions for it, Hearts of Stone, I think it's called. If I'm not mistaken, that one's probably the best Witcher experience you can get from the games, I would say, in terms of writing and story and character.
Fair point. I'll check it out.
As
So,
far as the books are
th-
concerned, I haven't read any of them, but I do have a passing knowledge of what they contain, more or less, and kind of how they are structured, right? Right? So, don't know everything that's in them detail wise, but I do have an understanding of what they go over. And I know that, like the show is, more centered on the books than the games, and the games are kind of their own thing and they kind of take from the books, but they don't really follow any of the books story wise. They are their own separate story, if you will.
so you would say this is more the games than the book? Oh,
I would say the show's more the book. Like it follows the books, like actual it. The show follows the story from the books. It's not its own
oh,
separate thing. Like it, if you're watching the show, then you've seen some of the stories in the books now.
okay. So with that said,
We'll
actually
get
talking
into
about the show.
more of that as we get into the spoiler area.
Yeah, but right now, just talking about general opinions, no spoilers yet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't seen the entirety of the show yet, you're still safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as someone, as I said, who doesn't have much experience with the games or the books, I think that this show has a lot of good elements in it. There are a lot of stuff I like in it, and I enjoyed some of my time with it. But it's very, very clunky. and it has pacing issues, and I'll even say plot issues that did take me away from it. And I'm sad to say I didn't get into it as much as I wanted to, which is sad because again there are a lot of stuff I do like the action is great, the CG for the most part is good too, the set designs, the costumes, the actors are all great.
People are really going to
And
disagree with you about the costumes, especially with the Nilfgaardian armor.
okay, well, I don't, they looked fine to me,
I thought it was
but
okay, but I definitely saw a lot of complaints with that one. And it is a little bit, if you come from the games, right? Like you have a set image of some of these things. And so when you see it and it's different, it's going to mess with you a little bit, and it's probably not going to come off as well as it might otherwise.
you know something I actually want to ask you, because I haven't seen a lot of in the few cons I've been to, I haven't seen much Witcher cosplayers,
Hmm.
but like how much did it resemble a cosplay you can find in a con?
So, I
And
mean, looking at the games or just cosplay in general, like I think their version of Geralt is spot on. I personally I thought, yeah, none of that feels off to me. Like that is the Geralt that I think most people would envision. Yennefer was even more spot on, right? Like Yennefer was just completely spot on, perfect. I don't think
Yennefer is the witch, right?
Winifred's the sorceress with black hair and purple
Yeah.
eyes, or
Okay.
lilac eyes, or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So
Whatever the color is. I don't know colors. I'm not good. The Triss was the one you'll probably see brought up a lot because a lot of people come from the games, and from the games, Triss was a white redhead.
I, yeah, I think that's the one I heard, that she was a redhead in the games, and it
So
wasn't.
when I when I saw, like, I don't think that's too much of a spoiler to say so, but when I saw her in the show, I was a little bit taken aback when she introduced herself as Triss, right? Like it caught me off a guard a little bit because it's not what I expected to see. But at the same time, it didn't really take away anything from me. Like, yeah, I'm used to seeing Triss as a redhead, and I'll never not see Triss as a redhead, to be honest. But I feel like as we see more of her character potentially, I think she'll really come into her own and really, set the character up for her, and and everything like that, right? So I try not to judge too much, and I think for the most part she was fine in the role. I think the actress did fine in the role, and she was great for it. It's just,
Okay.
I'm just used to having that mental image of Triss as a redhead, right? And so that's just what I'm used to, and not seeing that, it threw me off for a bit, but it's not something I would inherently complain about.
Okay.
It's not.
One,
It didn't
so
take
one.
away from my enjoyment.
Okay, but before we go on with the thing, because this entire thing did interrupt what my
A little
non-spoilery
bit.
thoughts. So, but one thing I do want to say is that one of my friends told me, when I was when I started the show, one of my friends told me that some of the episodes feel like a side quest in the games, which I kind of get what if that was the intention of the show, because you said it's more the books than the games. But
Hmm.
let's uh, let's assume they do treat some of the people. I'm sorry. By the way, I'm sorry if I'm going to say his name wrong. I'm very sorry because I know this is going to happen. But Garlet, was this correct?
Do you mean are
The
you
main guy,
Geralt of Rivia? Geralt.
Geralt.
Yeah,
Geralt.
Geralt.
Okay. Geralt. Okay. So all the I'm sorry, I knew this was going to
No, that's
happen. This
fair.
is why I'm
That's fair. Some
asking.
of the names are hard to
But
pronounce, like
yeah,
Stragobor.
so yeah. By the way, who made up these names? Is this a book thing? Is it
No,
the author
no.
I need to kill?
These are
But
this blame the author. He's Polish,
okay.
so English
Um,
translations, I suppose.
yeah, probably. But anyway, Geralt. When I can assume that the people he meets throughout the episodes and helps out with and stuff. That these are like side missions in the games, and it's not a bad idea to base the show format around, but at the same time, these feel like side quests. These feel disconnected from the big overall story that's going on.
So
And when this happens, the show starts to fail for me, because the overall plot, again, not going to go into details now, but the overall plot I found interesting. I found in I wanted to see what's going on. I was invested in it, but whenever we get to all the side stuff, and again, more details will come later. This is where I'm like, why do we need this? How is this contributing to anything? And there's another element about the show that you probably know what I'm talking about. I just don't want to say what it is yet. That I'm like, I get what they're trying to do, but at the same time, I just didn't feel it was necessary.
hmm, we'll see. Speaking to your this felt kind of side questy idea, something that I can help you out with on that, or maybe like just kind of clarify on things, since this is based on the books, right? If I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken, this first season mostly focuses on the first book. And you'll find as the books go on, Geralt isn't the main character. As you get into the second and third books, it focuses a lot more on Ciri. And I think you can understand why, considering the
And
story you
and
kind
you
of
know so
get
and
in
you
this
know
season.
something. You know something. I would actually want more focus on Siri than
Yeah, but
Geralt.
speaking specifically, right, the first book is basically a collection of short stories. And that's why I think a lot of this first season of the show feels so disconnected, because it's following that idea of a collection of short stories. So,
You can also kind of see on the Wikipedia page where we have the episode
mhm.
list on. You can see that each episode it says on what story from the book The Last Wish it's based on.
Yep, which is interesting, and I think really helps to set in that idea of like these are basically a loose collection of things that are kind of tied together but not entirely. They have a few things that kind of go in between each one, but it's very much, hey, we're just kind of learning about the world and setting up some of our characters and setting up very specifically Geralt and the character that he is throughout all of this, right? And then basically, I would say this first season is very much set up for what's to come, which is very much the story of Ciri and her journey.
Which fair, but at the same time,
But
but
I do
you
agree,
know
right?
what? We'll get to this when we get to
I,
spoils. But I said my overall thoughts. What are your
I will agree
views on
with
the
you,
show?
right? That I will agree with you, right? That I think this season is very heavy in the exposition and the stuff you need to know, right? I feel like this was definitely made for fans of the books or the games, especially the books, or just of The Witcher in general. I think you need to have some of that knowledge going in, because I will admit, even with having that knowledge, I did have to spend some time here and there, like, Stregobor, who's that character? Do I know him from somewhere? Look that up, click on that, and just go to a wiki. Basically, I just had to go to the Witcher wiki and just look up some characters like Renfrey or Stregobor or some of the others, and just kind of like, do we know him? What's he from? Where's he from? Or where are they from? Who are they? I did find myself doing that probably more than what I should have had to have done. And to be fair, maybe that's not entirely the show's fault. Maybe that's just my innate curiosity wanting to know more about that and looking that up, because you don't have to know, but I feel it does help if you do know, if that makes
Which
sense.
I get what you mean, but at the same time, I think it does feel in some places like they were over banking on the fact that people who are going to watch
Yeah,
this are fans.
yeah,
And as a TV show with on Netflix, which has millions of people watching, and then somebody says, "Oh, The Witcher, I'm going to check this out," without knowing it's based on something. This is this banking on the idea that your audience is just fans and no newcomers is is kind of a bad move.
yeah, I agree.
But
Well, asking you, were you, I know you talked to me before we recorded and said that you had watched the first three episodes and you just really weren't able to get into it all that much with those first three. And then you know, talking to you before recording as well, you said that with the fourth episode, you were able to get into it more. Did having none of that knowledge, do you think that hurt your enjoyment of the show more, or do you think it helped some?
You know what? Overall, I think if I had the knowledge before, reading books, playing the games, whatever, if I had experience with the franchise before
Mm-hmm.
this, I think maybe some stuff would have been clearer from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll explain more when we talk spoilers. But
That's fair.
there
Um.
are there are some stuff that I'm like, because let's say, I talked to you after 3 episodes, then I told you, listen, I'm not feeling it right now,
Yeah.
and you told me episode 4 starts, explaining stuff. But again, let's assume I didn't have to do this for a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what what incentive does a person like me have to continue a show he's not getting into after 3 hours of trying?
That's fair. That's very fair. Completely fair.
What?
Yeah, I
Yeah, but
completely get where you're coming from on that one. Like, yeah, what past this, like, what incentive does someone who doesn't have that experience and is not getting into it have to keep going with it? I get that because that's a lot of time to devote and just not really get it. And that's why I think the season is very front heavy on the exposition, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It's I think it's got a great opener, but that opener really relies heavily on having some kind of knowledge going in beforehand. If you don't have it, I think you're not going to enjoy it as much. And that's why I would say this show is very much for fans of The Witcher. If you're a fan of The Witcher, I think you'll find something to enjoy here. If you're not a fan, if you've never heard of it, you might get into it, but you also might have some issues with it. And even me being a fan, like, I told HC before we started recording, right? Like when he told me that he had problems with the first three episodes and wasn't really clicking with it as well, I said, hey, watch the fourth because I had a few issues with the first three episodes as well and them not entirely clicking and not getting the fact that the show and some of its events aren't in chronological order. It's not sequential. It's very much.
okay, since you mentioned it now, the thing that I said about me not feeling it's needed is the non chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
This, when I look at the entire thing, as one package, and I'll get into it soon. This has no business having no chronological order, and moreover, it makes things more confusing because there isn't much of a time gap, if you ask me,
Yeah.
or at least not visually,
Yeah.
to distinguish what's the present, what's the past, what's the future.
Well, I think the
There's
problem
no,
is the characters don't
and all
age.
that too, and also, because there is a show, completely different show here. There's no reason to compare the two ever.
Mm-hmm.
But when you watch a show like the drama show This Is Us, which is also about characters at different points in time, you know growing up and stuff, there are ways to distinguish
Mm-hmm.
how you know how the past looks, how the present looks, be it character makeup, character what the character wears, different actors playing the characters in different age and stuff, and what technologies they use that can tell you, okay, this is the past, this is the present, this is the future.
Mm-hmm.
I this this I can understand, but here there is nothing really distinguishing the past from the present, and it's like, okay, so what am I watching then? And
The
also we're in a fantasy world, so having to try and understand what time period am I at, while also having this entire exposition about how this world works because it's fantasy. This doesn't mesh, and it's just a big mess to
yeah.
someone who's not familiar with this thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they do try and show the passing of time via the seasons, right? Like you'll see in one place it's summer or spring, and then you'll go to another place and it's like winter at that point. So you can they do try, but I don't think it's clear enough. And like I said, I think the biggest thing that hurts them in this regard is that you can never really tell the characters have aged, right? Like you can't tell from because Geralt doesn't age, right? Like he grows old, but he doesn't grow old, right? Like he can live for an extended period of time.
Yeah, Geralt I can get because he's people say he's the Witcher. So and like you
Hmm.
say, he doesn't age like any other humans.
Yeah,
So you know what? I can understand that. That's fine. But when you look at a character that appears in the third episode, and then you see her in the seventh episode, and it's like, what's the difference? like,
so she
do
doesn't
they
age
all
either.
drink? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, do they all drink? Do they all drink? Do they all drink it like unicorn blood? Is this a thing in The Witcher?
Magic.
What?
The Witchers don't
Okay, it's
mutate. The Witchers don't age because of their mutations due to magic, and the sorcerers and sorceresses don't age because of their magic.
and now I'm talking about that character. I'm talking about Queen. Like, is she anything of those, or is she just really lucky to look the same?
You talking about who again?
The Queen.
The queen. Oh, the Kalinthe
Series grandmother.
grandmother.
Yeah.
No, she ages. She's just it again. That's the thing. Like it doesn't
Well, she ages
look like
really
it.
well, but I must say, I wish I could age like that.
Fair, completely fair. I think for those scenes, it's not as much of a difference time wise, right? It's only a couple years between, but it is more difficult to discern that, and I think it is a problem that hopefully, from what I understand, the second season isn't going to have. But the first season definitely has this issue, and it might be hard for some people to get past that, and which I completely understand that, and it definitely hurts this season. Overall, I would say if you're a fan, I think like I said, if you're a fan, I think you'll have something to enjoy here. If you're not a fan and you can get past some of those issues, I think you will find something that is enjoyable here because it is, there is some good stuff here. There's some great actors in this. As you said, the CGI is great, the effects are great, the scenes and the setting is great, and they do really well with what they have. It's just,
I do want to say that one of the creatures they kill in one episode looks exactly like one of my colleagues, and I'm so glad they killed him. But that's another thing.
fair.
Anyway, moving on to spoilers. So if you haven't seen the show and you're interested, this is your chance to close the video, go do something else, and then come back. And please come back. We need the views like badly. But but anyway, spoilers in 3, 2, 1. You still here? Good. The unicorns kill everyone. But okay.
Fair. No, no. Yeah, no, fair. They would do that in The Witcher. Unicorns would kill everyone in The Witcher. Don't mess with unicorns in The Witcher. They're not as pleasant as you would think they are.
Okay. Fair point. But anyway, so like I said, let's go episode by episode. So starting with episode 1, you know what this I was getting into? I would say I was starting to get into this one because at this point, we're introduced to Geralt in it opens with in a cool action sequence. I will say that, and then we also have the entire war that Ciri's kingdom is facing, and her grandmother dies, and she tells her that that Geralt is kind of her destiny, so
Her mother
she needs
dies.
to
Her
run away
grandmother
from.
doesn't. Well, no,
Yeah,
no.
her mother. Yeah, okay.
No, her grandmother. You're right.
If I'm getting
I'm wrong. It's
yeah.
the grandmother. It's
Oh,
just.
I was right. All right. If I was right, we're screwed in this episode because
Shush.
I'm.
Shush. Leave me alone. I didn't make a mistake. What are you talking about? That part was deleted from the VOD. That part was deleted from the video, I mean.
Well, you're recording, so maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I didn't record that part. We're starting over again. Start over.
No. No. I'm killing you if we're starting over because I think we had a really good take. We're continuing that. But anyway, so Ciri runs away from the entire war to find Geralt, and in time hooks up with this chick that dies at the end of the episode.
You,
What's
you
her
broke
name?
up a little bit there if you want to repeat that.
I broke. Oh, chick with the black hair that Geralt meets and bangs and then kills.
Renfrey.
Renfrey.
Princess Renfrey.
Thank you. Which, you know what, at the start I thought she was like an alter ego of Siri after she ran away.
Mm.
I'm assuming I later assumed it's not true.
No,
but,
no, no. There's nothing connected to.
I know there's no, but one thing I want to praise in this episode is the action sequence in the village after Winfrey runs away, and it's like Geralt versus all the people in the village. This action sequence, for once, it's one shot, which I always like action sequences that are either one shot or feel like a one shot.
That was a
and
great
it's also
way to end the episode.
yeah, and also it doesn't feel like they're trying to simulate an action sequence from the games, because when you play a game and you find a horde of enemies, the camera never cuts. So having the camera follow him like that and having no visible cuts is a very impressive note for the games, which I really like.
I agree. I think the first episode is definitely more of a bit of a love letter to the games, right? Somewhat. And I think it changes up somewhat after that first episode, but I think some of the stuff you'll see in this is a bit of a love letter to fans of the games. In some ways, especially like what you said with the action sequence. The action sequence with him fighting the Kikimor, I didn't enjoy as much personally because it was a little bit too dark in my opinion and a little bit harder to follow, because that one, if I'm not mistaken, cut a little bit here and there.
Yeah. This is something I do want to point out, that no cut section sequence, that's a reference that I feel like is a reference to how action games are being played.
Mm-hmm.
That's a one-time thing, and it's kind of disappointing, but I'm saying kind of because I know that making all action sequences like that is complicated.
Yeah.
And probably way more trouble than it's worth.
But it's definitely nice that they did it. Like, it's very much a one-time thing. Yeah, maybe it's something they'll come back to every now and again, but it really works for the scene. It works for it. The Geralt fighting Renfrey's thugs and then Renfrey herself, and there just being no cut in between any of that, and it all just being one shot, was just amazing to see. And really, I think, helped to set the tone for that episode and really set that episode up as a great opener. Shame that I feel that it didn't quite lead into something that worked as well for the next two episodes. Because after that point, things really do start to slow down somewhat.
Yeah, and this is the part
which isn't
I might
bad, but it definitely shows, I feel.
Because I'll tell you, like, I was actually into this after the first episode. I was like, okay, I figure like, okay, any questions I have might be answered in the rest of the season. And then episode 2 happened. And episode 2, I actually started, I was starting to check my watch. I was starting to check other things because it didn't feel like anything.
HC hates Yennefer confirmed.
What happened?
Episode 2 is the start of Yennefer's story, right?
Yeah.
So you hate Yennefer confirmed.
No, I don't hate Yennefer. Actually, you know what? Reading through the thing, I just remembered she was actually one of the parts I liked about the episode. It's everything else I was starting like.
Well, is there any other thoughts you have on episode 1 before we jump into it?
No, not really. I think we covered everything.
I'll say I like how they I liked how they did everything set up with. So I like the setup that episode 1 gives for way later in episode 8, I believe it is. There's a moment that we'll get to and talk about in episode 8 that when I saw it, I'm like, thought you were going to do this. I liked that, and I enjoy that you did it because I thought it was really well done, right? And this is where the one time I'll say that the not having things in chronological order might have played off fairly well because it works well for that moment. And maybe you know what I'm talking about, maybe not, or maybe you don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know. We'll get to it, and I'll point it out though when we get to episode 8. But I did like the setup with Siri and her grandmother during this one. But I think I think the first episode excelled when it focused on Geralt and Renfrey and the story of Geralt having to make a choice between killing Stregobor or killing Renfrey.
Okay,
And it
that's
was,
fair.
and like I said, I think it was very much, I think that part specifically was very much kind of a love letter to fans of the games. Like, hey, here's your choice between, lesser evil or good or greater evil or middling evil. And that little line from Henry Cavill as Geralt was also, I think, really great too. Like, there is no difference between evil, whether it's lesser, middling, or greater. It's all just evil. That
By
was an
the
enjoyable
way,
line.
I told you this before recording, and I'll say it again. Tell us in the comments. Who thinks after this show that Henry Cavill would have been a better Batman than Superman with that voice?
I would agree. I think it would have worked really well. Speaking of, I'll say this: Henry Cavill's voice as The Witcher, just beautiful. Loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, Henry Cavill is a great actor when you give him stuff to work with.
Hmm.
Looks at Justice League and Man of Steel and Batman v Superman.
But he did exceptionally well with this. I know a lot of people were worried that he wouldn't do this well, that he wouldn't have do a good voice for Geralt, but worry not a thing. He did great. Lovely.
No, he
Nailed the
did. He
character.
did. Yeah, he did great. Like I would listen to an audiobook with that voice, honestly.
I
But
think he did read one of the Witcher books with that voice.
oh, that's cool. That's
Yeah,
very cool.
very neat. But yeah, moving on
Okay.
to episode 2.
Episode 2. So, like I said, I like the plot with Yennefer. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy that. I always enjoy these kind of plots about the underdog,
So this
and
was. Oh, go ahead.
and this was a good underdog plot, I think, which
Yeah,
doesn't have much of a happy ending, honestly, but
not really. I agree.
mm, so
But that's The
I do
Witcher in
like.
general.
Yeah, but I kind of like this take that usually this character, the deformed hunchback would like have something have something going for it by the end, and you kind of see that she does get along with that one guy. I forgot the names. Excuse me, people, but they do have a bit of a thing going on, and not necessarily romantic, but just they have this relationship, and then by the end it doesn't go anywhere. They're actually mad at each other. It's like, oh, then that sucks. I
Istred was his name.
yeah.
Um, I'll say right. I had no knowledge of Yennefer's past from the books. Right, I only knew her from the games, so it was so interesting to see where she came from for me. Right, because I never had that knowledge. I never knew that, and I'd be very interested to see for those who played solely through the games, and the way you got to know Triss in the games. A lot of players grew close with Triss, right? They grew to like her a lot more so than Yennefer. And like the games have this big thing of Geralt, your Geralt, who did your Geralt choose to be with, forever? Was it Triss or Yennefer? Blah blah blah, that stuff. Romance, things people care about, I guess. But,
Yeah.
for me, I always liked Yennefer from the games. I thought, her back and forth with Geralt was in the games was very enjoyable, just as it is here in the show, by the way. But it was interesting to see where Yennefer came from and how she grew up and what she had to deal with, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's interesting because I think it'll definitely give a lot of people who only played the games a different look into Yennefer and her character,
Yeah. Okay, so that's cool. That I
which was
like.
very interesting for me, to get that look into that character and see like, wow, her childhood was shit and she had to deal with a lot of bullshit. Like
Yeah.
this episode is titled Four Marks, and that's very apt because Yennefer is literally sold to someone for 4 marks. She's only worth 4 coins. 4 gold
Oh
coins.
yeah. Oh
Like,
wow. That
damn
was
that
that.
scene.
That no, that was hurtful. Like I remember saying that, and I was like, "Shit! I want to kill that asshole."
And that was her, like,
Like,
and that was her, I guess, stepdad because her mother had an affair or was married to an elf at some point, and so we find out that Yennefer's also half elf,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and it's just
That angered me. That was so. Which I get. This was supposed to be the kudos of the show, but
Mhm. But that was really well
man.
done. That was
Yeah.
super well done. Like, just the actress did, the actress who plays Yennefer in that did extremely well with that scene.
Yeah,
Extremely well.
I actually wonder how much makeup they do, like before shooting.
I don't know.
Oh well. So the other thing, I think it's in this episode where Geralt is meets that musician.
Haskier the Bard, otherwise known as
Yeah,
Dandelion. What did you think
then
of
the
him?
line.
I loved him.
Here's the okay. I
Oh no.
I like no. Let me finish. I didn't say anything bad yet. Hold on.
Yet.
No. Here's the thing. I like the song. Let's start with this. I like the song.
Oh
I
yeah.
like the trial
That
coin
damn
to
song
actually.
is so. That damn song is an earworm. It's too catchy, and it doesn't even rhyme, but it's still too good.
Uh,
I
and
can't not
some
have
just
hum
to
the damn thing.
just to give you guys an idea, Wolf's Discord status ever since the show
Toss a coin to
premiered.
your Witcher.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Valley of Plenty.
That's the and I saw this as soon as I finished the episode. I'm like, of
It's too
course,
catchy. I have
but
had that song stuck in my head for so long. Not even stupid Christmas songs could get that song stuck out of my head. I was still humming it. It's it's a terrible song, but I love the fact that it's terrible. Like, it doesn't even rhyme, but I think it just works even better the fact that it doesn't rhyme. Dude rhymes "O Valley
uh,
of Plenty" with
you
"A
know,
friend to
Wolf.
humanity." Ugh.
Wolf. Seeing how this song is stuck in your head. There's only one thing you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Let it go. Let it go. I'm going to be killed.
Mm-hmm. We'll be finding a new co-host next episode, ladies and gentlemen. We'll bring
You're
Brush
the
back.
co-host. You're the co-host. I created the damn
I'm the
thing.
host now. I'll be bringing back
You
Rush as
work
my co-host
you
from now
work
on.
for me, bitch. You work for me.
Wow.
But
Just
anyway,
throw it all out there, huh?
yeah. I know I'm paying you in petty change, which means nothing.
You're
But
paying me? What?
yeah, 4 marks. Hey yo.
Hmm. Ouch. But
Anyway, back to whatever his name is.
Haskier
But,
or Dandelion, whichever you prefer.
then the line sounds fun. Yeah, let's go with this. So back to
Fair enough.
him. I like his idea. I also I like him as as a Geralt's a partner that have the you have the quiet tough one that does all the work, and then you have the energetic
Goofball.
goofball that wants adventure, and they work well off each other. It's not the first
Mm-hmm.
time this kind of dynamic has been done, but it
No.
works. Then again, as the show goes on, it feels like they're trying to make him like the meta guy, the
I
guy
like
who's like
that.
supposed
I enjoyed
you
that.
know
And I'll tell
you
you
know
why. But go ahead first.
and here's the thing, I don't hate this, okay?
No, that's
I
fair.
don't hate this. I'm not saying this as a criticism, and honestly some of his jokes actually, the meta ones actually made me laugh because I enjoy this type of humor. I have no problem with this. The thing is that I feel like there's a difference between being like a quote unquote observer for the audience
Mm-hmm.
than a comic relief.
Mm-hmm.
And if you started establishing a character as one thing and then you switch it around, it's not consistent. But that's my thing. It's a very minor thing. Overall, he's fine. I'm not saying this is it's really a nitpick, and something I noticed.
I do get where you're coming from, but personally, I really enjoyed the fact that he became kind of that more meta humor and that kind of outside looking in observer, because he is that outside looking in observer. He's very much this character who's the odd man out. Like, he's the normal human who's surrounded by different creatures and elves and sorcerers and sorceresses and knights and dwarves and the Witcher with his mutations. Like, he's the normal human. So he very much
Yeah,
is,
I
in
get.
dragons even, like, he very much is the one who's the odd man out. And I kind of enjoyed that. And I think they really played that up in a great way, because it's like he's the meta person. He's the one who's the observer looking in. He's the odd man out. So let's play up that fact and make him the odd man out. Make him feel like the odd one who's the more zany one to everything else that's just, yeah, this is normal. This is normal for the rest of us. It's not normal for him. So let's play up that fact. Let's make him into the odd one out and the more zany one and the more out there one to everyone else's even more zany and weird fantasy shtick, but played seriously and played straight. I liked that. I really enjoyed that, and I think it worked well off of it.
And again, I like the meta humor too. What I'm saying is, maybe I didn't say it right. I think they should have started from the beginning, not halfway through.
That's I can see where you're coming from. I think the start of it worked well though for what it was, because it played it to Geralt being in that normal world a bit more, and as we got more into the fantasy side of things, we see that switch, and I think that works well for that.
Mhm. Okay.
But
So,
looking at the
so
rest of
anything
episode
else?
two,
Mhm.
what did you think about Phil Evandrel and all of that? The elves.
It's something. It's something that happens.
Yeah, it's kind of. I
It,
think this is very much a part of the side story. It's not anything that I think we'll see too much of, if I'm not mistaken. It was, I guess, a neat little bit of world building to kind of build up the world more. That the elves are very much in a bad way right now, right?
Mhm.
I think it
Yeah.
works for, because at the end of this episode we get the toss a coin to your Witcher song, and we hear Haskier singing it, and as he starts to go through it, Geralt gets mad at him and says that's not how any of that happened, and he tells him, yeah, I know, but if I sing exactly how it happened, that's not going to be a good song, nor is that going to make you popular or anything like that. So I got to make some stuff up, and I got to do it this way.
Mhm.
And I love the the look Geralt gives, like he's upset, but he kind of understands that that's the way it goes. And I love how as you go through the different episodes, you learn that these songs have made Geralt more of a an icon, or more popular, if you will. Like they've
Yeah,
made him
that's
more
actually
approachable and
something
more
I like.
acceptable.
I liked in the overall arcing plot idea that people start by when they see Geralt, they're like, oh, it's a Witcher.
It's the White
There's
Wolf.
this.
Like they start
Yeah.
calling him by that name. They start acknowledging
Mhm.
him for who he is because of Haskier's songs, because of him singing about his adventures and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
it's interesting. I enjoyed that. I think that really works really
Yeah, I
well.
think that's another thing I actually like. So yeah, good on you, show. Another thing I like.
But yeah, I think for episode two, Yennefer's story is the big draw here, and just seeing
Mhm.
her go through everything
Mhm.
that she's going through with
and it
learning to
and
be
it
a
kind of
sorceress.
continues in the third episode.
Yeah. So moving right along, then segueing into it,
Yeah.
episode three, Betrayer Moon.
Mhm. You take the lead. Go.
Fair enough. So this one is basically we kind of end off Yennefer's story of finishing her training, and she has the chance to basically, as we saw her before, she's very deformed. She's a hunchback. She has a lot of, issues, not a, crooked spine. Basically, she looks awful, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's rude and mean. But that is the way the show sets it up, I suppose. But still very mean of me to say. Don't like that. But yeah, like she has the chance to transform herself into, her body into her ideal image, right?
Mhm.
And we also have a lot of political stuff going on, because the Brotherhood of Sorcerers is the faction of all the sorcerers and sorceresses all into one, right? And they basically have a connection to every king and queen and royal person who has any kind of major power within the world, I suppose, and they have that political connection, and their goal is to make sure that they all stay and play nice for the most part and don't start any wars or do anything that could, hurt a lot of people or make things bad for the sorcerers and sorceresses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think that was a little bit, it kind of got a little bit meh. Like it's
Yeah,
not.
this is one of those parts that I'm like, did we really need this here?
I
Like, did we really need to have this? Because
Yes, you
I
need it for the story of The Witcher because the story of The Witcher is very much connected to that. But at the same time, I feel like this is.
here's
But the
my
story of
question for
Yennefer is
you.
definitely connected to it. The story of The Witcher is a little bit connected to it. The problem is it 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 is kind of dull in a way, right? It's very dull.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It just
And this is the point. It feels like, I'll tell you this as someone again who just knows there's a book, there's a game, but goes into this show as a show. This was the point where I'm like, does this lead to something from the games? Is this something from the games, the books, whatever? Because it feels like it was there by obligation, and not necessarily because it tied to anything or was super important to anything.
it is important and it does tie to some things, and it does tie to things from the books and things you'll learn later on, like in terms of how things develop. It's but I agree. I don't know if it's just because it comes in this episode or how it's done. It definitely comes off as less engaging and less interesting. And maybe it's because we don't have any prior connection to a lot of the characters that are talking. And specifically, we don't have any prior connection to what it is the Brotherhood of Sorcerers are trying to do, right? And maybe that's the problem. Maybe because we have very little connection to it, it just doesn't come off as well. It's
Yeah.
not the worst thing ever, but it definitely, I feel, drags down episode 3 a lot. That's our focus, that the political thing is kind of a big focus when it hasn't been beforehand. It makes sense for Yennefer's character and what she's training to be and all of that, but it's still very much meh.
I think episode 3 is actually also a bit longer than a few of the other episodes, like, because episodes clock in at around an hour. I think this was an
Mm-hmm.
hour and a few minutes. So maybe cutting a bit could have helped.
I think the better half of episode 3, though, is Geralt going to Temeria and working with Triss.
Yeah, that was good. That
I
was
think
good.
that was definitely because this is the first episode we see Triss in, and like I said before, like when I first saw her, it was definitely a bit of a double take and a bit of a shock because again I'm used to seeing Triss as that redhead, right, and not seeing that threw me for a bit when they introduced her as Triss, but it does but I think as I saw it more, like it was very much a one time. Whoa, that's Triss. Okay, cool, neat. I can deal with that. That's neat. And I think the actress does play Triss very well. And I think she works in the role very well as well for the character. I
Okay.
think they also did the story of, Geralt helping Foltest and his daughter and all of that, and identifying her as a Striga, and fighting her as a Striga. Like that was really interesting. And then finding out that, hey, I have to fight this Striga, which is a female vampire, for an entire night into the morning. Like, wow, that's just such a great little moment of fuck. And he just says fuck. Like that's
Yeah.
his. Once he hears the Elven language, because once he hears that Foltest's daughter was cursed and by the guy who cursed her, and he hears the Elven tongue, which is the elves' language, right? That they use. He hears the curse he uttered. His immediate reaction is just eyes wide, fuck. That's it. That's all you get. It's just, and then he's like, wait, what's wrong? And it's just, and then he tells him, yeah, you don't have to be the one to fight a vampire until the rooster crows 3 times. And then you just hear the guy who tells him all this realize you have to fight her until the morning. You're gonna die. Like that worked really well. I felt like that was a really
Yeah,
good scene.
there are bits of comedy. There's one in the next episode actually
Yep.
that I want to point out.
But yeah, I feel while Yennefer's story does end in this episode, and it's kind of bogged down by all of the politics and everything. It does have an interesting enough ending that I think works for her and her character, but I think again it's bogged down by some of the politics stuff, by all the politicking. It kind of bogs her story down somewhat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and anything else? So episode 4.
I mean, we do have a little bit of setup for Yennefer later in the fact that she goes through all of those bodily changes, and doing so ends up means that she loses her fertility, right?
Yeah.
Which does set up some of her character arc a little bit later in the series as well. But yeah, I think episode 3 not bad, bogged down by some of the politicking somewhat though.
Yeah, but then we have episode 4.
This is probably, I don't know if it's my favorite episode, but I definitely enjoyed this episode a lot from this season.
I would say that this is the point where the show actually starts.
I could agree with that.
So one thing I want to say, because we talked about the humans, so I just want to point out when Geralt and remind me of his name again, goddammit.
Haskier, the bard?
Haskier, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Haskier or Dandelion.
Him. That they're invited to the party, to the Queen's party, and there's a guy there who thinks that I will remember his name by the end of the podcast, I swear. But
Haskier.
Then Pasquier or
Dandelion. Just say Dandelion.
Dandelion.
Or the bard. Just say the bard.
The bard. Okay. So basically, there's a guy there who thinks the bard actually slept with his wife, and he's like, I didn't see his face, but I'm pretty sure I would recognize him by the size of his dick.
Yeah, and that was good.
and then Geralt actually comes in and there's an animal that actually kicked him there and knocked it off. And it's like, oh shit. I found it funny that, and it actually works. The guy backs out after this. This is awesome.
He offers him a coin and says, here, for being a eunuch, I feel for you. And it's like,
yeah, that's great.
That was funny. That worked. That was some good humor back and forth, especially coming from Geralt, who's normally way more of a serious straight man, right? To Dandelion or Haskier's antics, right? So that was good. That was enjoyable to see.
And this did leave me with a question that the show doesn't answer. I don't need the show answering this, but still, did the bard actually sleep with that person's wife? I'm curious.
It's Dandelion. Assume he did, yeah. He sleeps with a lot of people. A lot of people, according to the games, and if I'm not mistaken, the books even, Dandelion is very promiscuous.
So this guy
that's the story he puts forth, at least anyways, that he's very promiscuous. Whether he is or not, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but he definitely puts forth that idea.
Okay, fair.
But episode 4, we kind of start off with a bit of Yennefer and kind of how she's progressed into being this very powerful, very adept sorceress, and she's being chased by an assassin, and with a queen who, if I'm not mistaken, Queen Collis, who she apparently isn't able to. She's not able to save. Queen Collis does die. Queen Collis is a bit of a bitch too, so you kind of don't feel bad that she died, because her immediate reaction is, hey, here's my child, kill that, or kill that sorceress instead, not me, don't kill me. You can you don't feel bad for her death at all.
No.
But, you eventually have Yennefer come back and try and save the kid, but the kid doesn't make it, and I think she does kill... No, she doesn't kill the assassin, but she kills the assassin's pet. Oh, I think that was... I forget what the monster was, but the assassin's using a monster to try and kill them as well, and she kills the monster, but gets away with the child, but unfortunately the child still dies.
Yeah, that was actually...
Okay.
That was... Again, this was a cool action sequence, because again, it is nice to see all...
It's well done because you have them traveling to these multiple different sets and settings with the use of teleportation. which is interesting
Yeah.
and well done. I thought it worked really well for
And
traveling
also,
between all that.
there's this monster creature thing that whatever the bad guy he throws at them, and you can actually see, Yennefer is the witch, right? I just need
Yeah,
to make
yeah,
sure
she's
I'm
the
getting okay.
sorceress witch, whatever.
Okay, I'll go with witch. Cooler to say.
It
So
works.
but there's the thing where, and there's this thing coming up, and her magic is not just teleportation. She actually makes the thing kill itself.
Yeah.
This is like I saw this and I thought, well, I served my purpose. No more. This is that the creature is like self-aware. And it's like, oh, she actually made him do it. That's
Hmm.
cool. And I like it that even though she doesn't necessarily like the kid's mother, she still tries to save the kid.
Yeah.
And I did feel bad that she couldn't do it. Like that was very sad.
Well, this also, I
So
think, sets up the kind of future for Yennefer's character, where Yennefer does kind of become a little bit obsessed with her legacy and what she wants to be and do, right, going forward. And like what she wants to leave behind after her potential death, right? And I think that sets that up, and that sets up her wanting to potentially have back her ability to have kids of her own, right? Like that's a focus for her
yeah.
a little bit later on, which I think is interesting. I think this is good setup for that. But the bigger
Yes.
focus of this show is
This
meeting
episode.
Calenthe. Yeah, this episode, sorry. Meeting Calenthe and in the past with Geralt and Haskier and going to this big dinner that she's having for her daughter, Ciri's mother, before Ciri's ever in the picture. And this is, the big focus of that is, she's having a dinner for her daughter and her potential husband, right? And, trying to,
Yeah.
you know, um, get different suitors for her.
Yeah.
And
And
this goes about as well as anything in The Witcher would go. It's not pleasant. But this is the
well,
story.
if by not pleasant you mean that the guy the girl actually loves has been cursed and is now a hedgehog, and yes, you don't need to tell me, but trust me, I saw it. Never again. But and it would actually still be better than the original movie, but that's another.
Mm.
So as all stories are, he bursts in. We find out he's a hedgehog, and of course, he's the guy that the princess loves,
Yep.
and the queen is very much unhappy with it.
Like,
And then,
I love how, you have this big, like, she asks Geralt to, like, hey, kill him. And Geralt's like, I love how, you have the knight come in, you have the cursed knight come in, Urchion is his name, or otherwise known as Dunny or Dooney. He comes in and, like, he has this big thing of, like, hey, I was promised your daughter in the Law of Surprise. And the queen's instantly doesn't, even let that be said. She's instantly, hey, kill him. And the second everyone hears the Law of Surprise was honored, everyone's immediately like, hey, you have to honor the Law of Surprise. You can't go against that. That's destiny. And I love how the queen's very much, fuck that, fuck destiny, fuck anything about how,
yeah,
I have to do what, it's very much, in a way, I think a lot of people will see that as woman power, yeah, but that's not really the focus. It's more so
no,
she's
like,
earned her place in this world, right? Of everything that's going on.
yeah,
And she's earned it the hard way with all the work she's done. There's the reason why she's referred to as the Lion of Sintra, right? Like she's very much a badass. Rightfully so,
yeah,
too. But, so it's very much like she gets upset. But
very
I think,
upset.
but it works, right? Because Dunny comes in, and basically this huge fight starts, which was also extremely well done to see all of this, like everyone fighting, and
Yeah,
they're ready to kill
and
Dooney, and
also,
Geralt just steps in and says, "Nope, you're not doing that." Just immediately, like, yeah, that
yeah,
worked.
and also, when it goes into all slow motion and stuff with
Mm,
the background and stuff, this looked gorgeous. This was great.
mm. And I loved how, I forget his name. Who is the guy who Queen Calenthe ends up marrying?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I wish I could remember his name. Um, it doesn't say it in our list. Darn it. I don't remember his name. Darn it. Oh, well, the guy who marries Queen Calinthe, I love how he kind of steps in to protect Duny and everything as well. And I love how he disagrees with the queen, but also still really respects her a lot. And I love how he steps in, like, Geralt steps in to save Dunny, and this dude just steps in front of all these other people, all these other suitors and everything, and says, "Hey, you want to fight? You got to go through me first." And he's just got this little dagger in his hand, and like, dude, that's badass. I like that guy. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed all of that. That was great.
And another thing I like is that, when Geralt actually cures Danny, and makes him a human again, and he's like, "How can I repay you?" And Geralt is like, "I don't," he's like, "I don't need it. I don't need anything," and he's just about to leave, and then when people tell him, "But you basically saved my life here.
So he
Did
invokes the
all this
law of
from."
surprise himself as well.
Yeah, yeah, but the thing is that you can kind of tell that he doesn't invoke it because
Well, he
because
doesn't
he
care. He
wants it.
doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't
Yeah,
care.
he doesn't care, because I like the idea that he's just, okay, you want to repay me, then fine, by surprise. I don't really care what how you repay me. I'm just happy you're happy. Now let me go. Bye.
Yeah. But unfortunately for Geralt, that's not how things work out. We actually find out that Pavetta, Calente's daughter, and the one Dunny was there for to begin with, is actually pregnant with Ciri.
And this is the point where I'm starting to say that the entire different time thing idea doesn't really add anything, because you tell me, aside from this plot, which I agree should have taken place in the past,
Mm-hmm.
this I agree with, but everything else, every other adventure that Gelt has gone through in this show, be it in the previous two episodes or some of the later episodes that we're about to go into, other than that, did they really need to take place in the past? Did it really need to throw that other layer and just create this entire mess? Because
Unfortunately, I don't think there's any way you can connect it otherwise.
hmm,
I don't think there's any way you can connect Ciri to being with Geralt during those events and it come
no,
off
no,
as good. And
because like I said, based on what after that one friend told me, I'm like, if the other things that the girl does in the season are basically side quests that not really have anything to do with the main plot, then does it really matter if they're in the past or not?
I think it does because the big setup is for Geralt to accept his destiny, to accept the fact that him and Ciri are connected, that they have that connection. Because you have a lot of characters, like even in episode 4, you have the one of the mages, I forget his name, who was there at the feast with Geralt and Haskir and at the feast for Calinthe. I forget his name, but he's one of the major sorcerers, and he sticks with Ciri as well for a time too, and is an interesting and fun character. But even he, at the end of episode 4, tells Geralt, "Hey, this is your destiny. You struck the law of surprise. You have to honor that now." And Geralt's like, "Yeah, no, fuck that. I don't care about destiny. I said I didn't care about destiny, and I still don't care about destiny. It was just a thing. It happened. I'm not sticking with it." And he,
But that's the thing. It's something that's done in this episode, and then we forget about it
well, we
until the
don't
end of
though,
the show.
because you do have other episodes bring up that idea of destiny once more as well, right? Like you continue to have that brought up.
Yeah, we're continuing to have it brought up, not with Geralt, who's still in the past. Every time it's brought up, it's with Ciri in the present. So when it comes to him, which one would say he's the main character of the show, because he's the main character of the books and stuff and the games. it just, and he's in all the promotional stuff, like even in the picture we're using right now as a thumbnail. He is the focus. So basically our main character, with the exception of episode 4 and the final 2 episodes, have nothing to do with the main plot.
That's fair. I disagree, but I don't really have a good defense for you. Unfortunately, I do think right. I do have my own problems with it as well. I do get it, and I do understand where you're coming from. But I do think I just don't think there's a better way to connect it. Really, I don't think there's any way they
which
could have done it differently or better.
which, like you said, fair. I don't know. Maybe someone who will listen to this and all of a sudden tell me, you know what? There is actually a reason as to why this is. I'm willing to hear it. Just as watching this show as is, I just didn't see the need to really split to have two timelines.
I think
But
episode
again,
four
that's me.
does it the best, though. I will say, I
Yeah.
think episode
No,
four
no,
is the
no. In
best
episode
setup
4,
for it.
yeah, like I said, in episode 4, I get it. Episode 4, I accept it. I like it. I see how this works. It's when it comes to the other plots of like the other side quests, for lack of a better term, the girl does, then I don't think it necessarily should have been in the past. Maybe make it like he's looking for a way to do all this stuff in order to gather information or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess they could have. Yeah, I can see that. They could have set it up better in a way to connect it more than what they did. I can see that. I'm not sure what that way could potentially be, but I do get where you're coming from at the very least.
Okay, with that said, we're halfway through the season and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
episode 5, Battle Appetite.
So this one is a little bit of a continuation from episode 4 in the fact that Geralt's having trouble sleeping. So he's trying to capture a djinn to help him sleep. And he's having trouble sleeping because of and this is where I connect back to that thing of, they do connect Geralt back to that law of surprise thing and his destiny, quote unquote destiny, right? In the fact that he's having trouble sleeping because he's not accepted that and he doesn't know if he should accept it and it's weighing on him, right? And that's something they kind of bring up with, Haskier and stuff like that. And during all this, Geralt does find the djinn, and eventually 3 wishes are made, but Haskier is unfortunately dying because of one of the wishes because his throat's being magically destroyed, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
This, let me ask you this, okay? If this was any other show, like let's say if this was like a plot in Race to the Edge or something, we would have dismissed this as filler.
but here it's not, because
Yeah,
it does.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. In any other show, this would have been filler, but somehow they managed to make that not filler. So kudos. This was actually.
I mean, here the big focus is on Yennefer and Geralt finally meeting.
Yeah.
And specifically, this is the thing that ties Geralt and Yen together, because you don't know this, but I do. The wish that Geralt makes to the djinn at the end of the show to save Yennefer is that they'll always be tied together, is that they'll always be, they're always going to have their fates entwined, right?
By the way, actually, just a question: is this the episode with the orgy?
Yes. In the background,
Okay.
yes. Geralt meets
In
Yen.
the background,
It is.
they put an emphasis, dude.
But I know they do. But a lot of the shots of this scene is very much like Geralt is the orgy is behind Geralt as he's talking to Yen,
Yeah,
and they do it on purpose.
yeah, I know, but this is just one of those things that I'm like, people. I heard people say that they couldn't get in the chair because of the nudity, which
Eh,
it's not a problem for me specifically.
Honestly, there's not as much as you would think or what I expected, to be honest. This is the
Yeah, but
biggest moment.
yeah, but I'm talking in the games like that. Some
Mm.
people say that they didn't necessarily get into the games because there was too much of it. Again, I heard people say it. I am not taking responsibility to how true this is.
The first one has
But
quite a bit. The second one
mhm,
has less, and the third one I think has even less than that. Like the third one's very much relegated to a few specific scenes, not a lot,
yeah,
surprisingly
but
enough.
the thing is though that when this happens, I'm like, yep, this is what I expected.
But yeah, no. Coming into The
Also,
Witcher, this
also,
is somewhat expected.
also, by the way, do not watch this in your room on your big TV when your parents are walking around. Just a pro tip.
A little bit awkward, just a little bit. Um, the big focus on this is Yennefer and Geralt finally meeting one another, which is always enjoyable because Geralt and Yennefer have a very enjoyable back and forth of kind of flirting but also insulting one another at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's what I got, and also, you can tell they have an attraction for each other,
oh
for
yeah,
one another in this episode because it ends with them doing it.
it does. But I think, and I also love the way it ends in
You know what I said about a double-edged sword? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm
fair.
I'm kidding.
But I love the fact that it ends with Haskier looking through the window of, oh wow, they're really, thinking they're dead, and then seeing, oh wow, they're really going at it, like just looking through the window, and the elf that's with him just kind of pulls him away, like, no, we're done here, let's leave. That was
Yeah,
funny. That was a good little laugh.
yeah, that was
Thinking
fun.
that they're both dead and they're not. That was good.
So it's like the biggest fake out in the history of fake outs.
But yeah, I think, coming from the games, I think they did exceptionally well with Geralt and Yennefer's back and forth and really nailing that feeling of flirting with one another, but also insulting one another. But at the same time, having that edge of Geralt knows Yennefer's up to something, but never quite being able to figure out exactly what it is until it's a little bit too late. And then having to try and either stop her or him wanting to save her from herself, or that's what he feels he wants, things like that. I love that back and forth between the two characters that they have. I think it's really enjoyable to see, and I think they nailed it here in this episode and in the show in general.
Yeah, and also, well, but there is something that I have discredit enough credit to the relationship between Geralt and Yennefer,
Mm-hmm.
which is, on the one hand, I like their interaction with each other. I think the actors have good chemistry, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I've seen this kind of relationship being done in the past, which is not
That's
the
fair.
show's fault, to be frank. Just saying,
It's not
just
anything unique,
just
that's for sure.
yeah.
And that's completely fair. Like, it's definitely not unique, but I do think it's done well here.
Mhm.
The other thing with episode 5 is, and I think this is the character you're talking about, the Doppler.
The Doppler, tell me who it is,
Well, the
just
Doppler
to
doesn't
remind me.
necessarily have a name, but we have the guy from the. Oh crap! I'm gonna forget the name. Kahir, who's the leader of the Black Ones. Oh, what's the name of the Empire? I don't remember anymore. I'm bad at names.
Yeah, I'm even more, but
And there's a lot of them to keep up with in this show. Unfortunately, in the first season,
and all of them are terrible,
the
as we
Nilfgaardian Empire,
established.
the Nilfgaardians. That's it.
Uh,
So
the
we have
Nilfgaard, yeah.
Kahir, who finds a Doppler who assumes the identity of Mausik, the mage who was trying to help Ciri and stayed with the queen to help raise Ciri and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, right, Siri. I forgot about. But yeah, along the episodes, she found this forest where she's been kept safe,
Yes,
and
by
then there and
some
then
dryads.
yeah, and then there's this guy who comes in and tells her, "Listen, I know how to get her to Geralt, and yada yada yada. Come with me."
And he's faking it because he was a Doppler hired by Kahir.
Like all helpers, like all guiders in life.
True. And we also, if I'm not mistaken, this is the episode where Mausik is killed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. An enjoyable character. Shame to see him die, but yeah, he was killed in this episode, unfortunately.
Actually, wait, isn't this the next episode?
Nope, he dies in this one.
Okay.
It's very small. It's a very small part.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that sad to see him go.
So moving on to episode
Anyway,
6, rare species.
episode
Now this one I also
episode
really
6.
liked.
Yeah, I enjoy this one.
I think
enjoyed it.
Borch.
The,
Borch sells this one.
Mhm. Yeah,
Him
this
coming
is
in.
this is the part. This is the part where the meta humor really worked because they're going on this quest to slay this dragon,
Mhm.
and there are all of these groups of people, like they're not traveling by themselves. They're traveling with other hunters that each one has their own their own ways of doing things, their own ways of talking and stuff, and then you see this guy being like, so you're doing this, so you're doing that, so you're like this, and I enjoy that. That was fun.
So this episode, from my understanding, deviates from the books quite a bit, though, because in this episode you have Yennefer and Geralt together. You have Yennefer, who's been with her knight escort, who are here to hunt the dragon. You have a band of dwarves led by, I think it's Ziggy Yarpin, who is an enjoyable and fun character. Who they're there to kill the dragon as well. Then you have a company of professional monster hunters called the Reavers. They're there to hunt the dragon, and the Reavers are led by, I think, Bolt is his name, something like that. I'm trying to look up, see if it has it listed real quick. I think his name's Bolt, though, and then you have Geralt and Haskir, who come in because they're invited to hunt the dragon with the help of Borch and his 2 bodyguards.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the books, if I'm not mistaken, there's a lot more to this, where there's a moment where Geralt and Yen are trapped on the side of a cliff and they're about to fall, but Bolt from the Reavers saves them and helps them up. Then you have a moment where Yennefer's knight escort is challenged. Borch is also, you see in this episode where Borch is, falls from the cliff, right? And we see him disappear with his 2 escorts, right?
Yeah.
You realize that Borch is the golden dragon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Borch comes in later back on in the books as the golden dragon and says, hey, none of you can kill the dragon, but if you can defeat me in a one-on-one fight, then I'll let you do what you came here to do. And so Yennefer's knight escort is supposedly the one who accepts this because he wants to have an honorable fight, right? Because knight and honor and all that. So he charges at the dragon, and he's killed by the golden dragon Borch. In the books, in the show, however,
in the show, actually, something. The moment he dies is actually one of my favorite parts of the episode.
Yeah, I think I think
because
it's interesting to see the changes.
Because it was not necessarily for the. I'm not sure if it was intended, but everyone's reaction to it, they just see that he's dead, and everyone's reaction is like fuck, and then they move on.
It's kind of like
okay.
It's kind of like, well, he died. Well, that sucks the way he died. Pretty shame that someone killed him the way that.
It's like never cared for him.
I know. I think. Yeah, that's kind of the point I'm working towards. It was interesting to see the changes the show made, but I think the show made the right changes for this story, right? Because Yennefer's knight escort is killed, basically has his throat slit while he's taking a shit in the woods. That's how he dies. Mm-hmm. And you find out later that it's one of the Reavers, that it's Bolt, the leader of the Reavers, who had killed him. Yeah. And they just killed him to get rid of the competition, right? And it's just funny. It kind of works for that character because it's kind of a nothing character that comes in and, he's cool, but you don't really care that much about him. So it's interesting the way he dies. I think the show made some good changes to this story to make it work for the show. And I think that's interesting and neat. And there's not too many, other than that, nothing else changes majorly. But you do have, Yennefer and Geralt having more of their back and forth. Yennefer finally finds out the wish that Geralt made to the Djinn, and you find out, and she's very upset by it, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Because, up to this point, they've been meeting each other, and this is implied to be one of their more recent meetings. They've met a bunch of other times before this, and basically every single time they end up having sex with one another. This time
Yeah.
being no different, except this time, Geralt finally tells Yennefer exactly what it is that the wish he made, and she gets upset by it, obviously.
Mhm.
And I enjoyed the dwarves. They were very fun and enjoyable. Very foul mouthed.
This is an episode that relies on character interaction. The character
Mm-hmm.
interaction is fun.
Yeah, I think they excel really well with it here. Borch was great. Haskier was great. Um, Not too much to say about this one, really. I think this one definitely deviates a little bit. Like this, we had kind of our build up of the main story
Well,
somewhat.
just because it deviates from the other from the source material doesn't mean it's bad.
Oh no, I mean like it deviate. Like we've had our build up for the main story, so this
Oh
one
yeah.
focuses more so on this side story for Geralt, and finally, and we do have a moment of Borch saying, "Hey, destiny is what it is. You need to accept that and deal with it." And this is the moment where Geralt finally kind of accepts that destiny. And the next two episodes we go into are really focused on getting Geralt to the place he needs to be at, right? And setting up for our main plot line with Ciri and them two finally uniting together.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of this one, we kind of see Ciri and we'd never actually mentioned him. Poor Dara, the elf character that Ciri meets and travels around while she's looking for Geralt. Like they
Yeah.
start to question the Doppler, and they realize, hey, the Doppler isn't who he says he is. He's faking it all, and so there's a fight that breaks out between them, and then we also have this fight break out between the guy who's been chasing Ciri and the Doppler as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the Doppler apparently escapes, and Ciri and Dara, go their separate ways because Dara doesn't want to travel with Ciri anymore because he's going to end up getting him. She's going to end up getting him killed, and then we have the leader of the Nilfgaardian Empire and Fringilla, his mage sorceress partner, moving forward with their next plan to continue their war on the north, which is also a thing that's happening. Again, kind of going back to that. This first season is very front heavy on a lot of information that you kind of have to keep up with. Many of these things we haven't really mentioned in some of our
Which,
stuff.
like I said, is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You have too much information that you're trying to cram
Going
in.
into it, like we have Ciri being chased by Kahir, who's the leader of the Nilfgaardian Empire. We have Fringilla, who apparently helped them get this way, and they're doing all of this for their reasons, which you don't quite know about. They're attacking the north and having this war with a lot of the northern kingdoms, apparently. You have other sorcerers and sorceresses doing their things. You have Yennefer's story of Geralt going on his adventures. It's a lot to keep up with.
There's a lot to keep up with, and there's part of me that says maybe this didn't need to be 8 episodes, and you could have cut some of that stuff down. But at the same time, I also have the idea that if this was a full 13 episode season, maybe it would have been better
so.
because you have more time.
I think 8 was the moment where they needed to end it, personally.
Yeah, I personally would even say I could have maybe even less than.
Potentially, I think 8 definitely works at the very least. I think if they would have tried to go more episodes, it wouldn't have worked. It would have fallen flat very much. So it would have definitely felt like, yeah, this is too much. So I think 8 episodes is definitely, it ends where it needs to end at the very least. Maybe it could have done with less, but it definitely did not need more than 8. I would say that much at the very least. But yeah, I mean, going right into it, episode 7.
Episode 7. Before a fall.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is the point where all finally Geralt is being
stuff starts to line up, and we kind of see our past and present become more past and future become like we're in the present now, because we see the start of this episode. Geralt comes to Cintra and decides to all right, I'm going to invoke the law of surprise finally. Calanthe, you have to give me Ciri. And we see that Calente tries to trick him and offers up a fake, but Geralt isn't fooled because Mousik tries to warn him because Mousik still supports the idea of the law of surprise. But unfortunately, Geralt, Calente's husband, who marries him, who at one point did support the law of surprise, no longer does because of many different reasons. One of those reasons being that he saw how broken Calenthe was when she found out that Ciri's mother had died. Right? When she found that out, she was heartbroken, and he says, you weren't there for that. You didn't witness what all she went through, and the fact that she brought herself back from the brink of that. I have to support her because of that. Like, that's a powerful moment, and you kind of see, like, hey, you get why he's on the side that he's on.
I would say this is a powerful moment, but I'll say even the part that actually hit me more is that when Geralt is actually talking to the Queen, and she tells them it's she's the one to tell him that that Ciri's mother actually died, and and this is the point that she's the one that tells him she died, you went here.
Yep.
And then you see her husband who before then fully supported the Love's Prize, and then now he's like, he's
and you
changed.
Understand why, and you get
why. Exactly. I get the why. This episode was like, okay, I actually managed to watch this episode and say, okay, forget all the problems you have with the show, overall, because I'm actually interested in this. I'm interested in seeing where this is going.
This really works. It's unfortunate that this is focused so little, right? Because the big focus from this one is on the mages and Yennefer kind of re-meeting with Istred once more, trying to convince him to, do their own thing now and go their own way. Unfortunately, he disagrees and doesn't want to do it anymore. He's moved on from her, which is a little bit different from the show, or from the books, if I'm not mistaken, because if I'm not mistaken, Istred definitely is madly in love with Yennefer even after that point, right? But I think the show makes that work for what it is. I think it works really well. After that, we see Yennefer return to her school where she was trained, and apparently the mages are debating about whether to oppose Nilfgaard or not, right? And you have this big thing of, we meet Vilgefortz, who's a great character. I really enjoyed him. I think they portrayed him really well. Okay. He's the guy who you see in the next episode to help you to give you a reminder. He's the sword guy who can throw his sword and make it reappear in its scabbard and fights.
Okay.
Great, great guy. Great character. Really enjoyed him.
Yeah, I think there's a fight scene with him in the next episode that I really enjoyed,
which was really great. But and this ends, and this is the moment where I really enjoyed. You have all this kind of past and present time skip, kind of building up to Geralt's apparently, when the Nilfgaardian Empire attacked Sintra, and you see the Queen come back and she's all wounded and everything. Geralt was there. He was in the dungeon of the castle, and Ciri, and they were so close yet so far away, sort of thing. I like that. I really enjoyed that little twist, that Geralt was there the entire time. Oh my god. That was good setup. I actually really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I actually kind of really enjoyed seeing that. And that's the one moment where I would say, you know what? It paid off for that one moment. I don't think it was worth doing for the entire season, but it definitely paid off for that one moment at the very least, I would say.
Yeah, sometimes a moment can be worth it, even if anything leading up to it is
which is fair.
So moving on to the final episode, I guess. Much more, which is probably what the producers of the show have to say when they ask them if there will be another season, because there's already a second.
Yeah, they've already greenlit a second season, which is great.
Which is coming out in 2021. So.
Oh, that's a long wait.
Yeah.
Boo! But no, that's fair. I'm sure.
Well, we're basically in 2020 by this point. We're recording this on the 28th. We're recording this on December 28th, 2019.
You can't date the recording.
What?
You can't. You're not supposed to date the recordings, HC.
We dated the recordings before.
Which is bad form. You're not supposed to do that. We got to make it look like we're way ahead of schedule and that we're not recording these on the day of.
I
Gotta
have.
make it look like we're professional.
We are professional.
Yes. Totally. Wink.
Our tagline is unprofessional and debatably amusing.
I don't know what you're talking about.
What? You made up. Never mind. Moving on.
No, but yeah, like I think episode 8 is probably definitely a top episode from the season. Like everything coming together.
There's a lot going on.
Oh yeah, but it all
together,
works. Like you're not confused by it in this episode. Everything. You know,
I won't say that everything without went without me being confused every once in a while, but that's probably because but maybe it's because there was so much going on, and I also just knew that this is the final episode, so I was just trying. I guess I was just trying to find the ending, maybe.
Yeah,
but overall, like this was basically one big fight scene, and
so yeah, we have the big battle of Sodden Hill, something that's very big within the Witcher lore, I guess you would say, because it's a fight between 14 mages that showed up at Sodden Hill to fight back against the Nilfgaardian Empire and keep the Nilfgaardian Empire from being able to invade the north. And it's a very big thing within the Witcher lore. Like you hear it talked about a lot in the games where, hey, we honor these mages who died at the Battle of Sodden Hill, and the Battle of Sodden Hill affected the mages. So
you actually hear that battle. You see that battle in this episode.
Yeah, you see that battle in this episode. You hear about it in the games. You read about it in the books, but you get to finally see it.
Okay, so for fans, that's probably really cool. So
it was interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, there are a mage or two that we don't see at the Battle of Sodden Hill, and I'll be interested to see if we see them later. Two names in particular that stand out are Frangilla Vigo and what's her name? I'm gonna look it up real quick.
I hear typing.
You hear nothing. I totally know what I'm talking about.
He lied.
Did not. Totally didn't. It was Frangilla Vigo and one other one. Philippa Eilhart. That's the one.
Okay.
Philippa Eilhart. Yeah, those two are mages that we didn't see in the show at all, if I'm not mistaken. And they were at the Battle of Sodden Hill, if I'm not mistaken. Even in the books, and especially in the games, they're talked about being at the Battle of Sodden Hill. But you don't see them in the show, which I'll be interested to see how the show might use them later, potentially. But other than that, like, I think the Battle of Sodden Hill was done extremely well to see all these different magical powers and abilities being used back and forth, right? Like you see, the Nilfgaardian Empire and how they kind of treat their mages as basically cannon fodder, right? Like, hey, here's this spell, cast it, it's going to kill you. Oh well, cast it anyways. Like, damn. And then you see how the mages on the Northern Realms side, kind of care about each other more. Like, they're more like, hey, be careful with your magic. Don't let it consume and kill you, right? Which is interesting. Kind of seeing that back and forth and how they both view mages and magic.
So, but overall, anything else to say about the fight, or can we talk about and by the way, actually, this is something I want to ask you. There's the after the episode begins with Geralt faint, and then there's this guy dragging him along in a carriage, and as Geralt is there, he kind of has flashbacks to a kid being abandoned by his mother. Is this his backstory?
Yes, that is young Geralt and his mother. Yes, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, like you do see his mother is the one who, helped save him and cured him when he was, struck down by those ghouls, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, okay. So I wasn't I'm asking because I wasn't sure if this is something that they made up for the show, if this is something that's mentioned in the books
I
or games.
don't know 100%, but I think that's something that is mentioned in the books. But don't
Okay.
quote me on that. But I think that is something that you do have some understanding of from the books. I don't think that's totally a show thing. I don't
Hmm.
know how specific it is in the books, but I think that is something that you do understand and know a bit about. And you do get to
Okay.
hear, his mentor Vesemir's voice in this. It'll be interesting to see if we, to get to see Vesemir in the coming seasons, hopefully. Um, eh, Something that I kind of didn't like their portrayal of, I loved, we talked a bit about it before, but Vilgefortz and his fight with Kahir and him basically just running around throwing his sword and reappearing it back in its scabbard and pulling it back out again. Like that was really a really great and enjoyable
Yeah,
fight.
that's cool. That's
Like that
very
was
cool.
really well done and a really good use of that. But you find
Hmm.
out later, like you see Vilgefortz isn't dead. He wakes up and he basically kills another northern mage. This is supposed to signify him as a turncoat, right? Losing my
Hmm.
voice. But I don't think it's done that well, personally. I don't know about you, but it kind of came off as like, wait, why did he kill that guy? What's going on there?
Yeah.
It was a little bit out of nowhere, in my opinion. There wasn't any kind of good setup for that, I feel. I don't know. Like maybe I just feel like there wasn't enough good setup to really signify that he's a turncoat there. It just seems kind of odd, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was a bit. Eh.
But other than that, I mean, like we said, the fight was done great. We see a bit of Geralt's backstory, and we kind of have Geralt, come to the same house. Apparently, the man he's saved by is the husband of the husband of the woman that Ciri was saved by in the previous episode, right?
Yeah,
And we see,
yeah, and
Ciri, and just for a moment, they kind of bait you out with Ciri ran away, and maybe Geralt and Ciri
yeah.
are gonna miss each other once more.
I was so ready to get angry about this. I was so like, if you are doing this, we are done. I'm going to be like, because just to clarify, I've seen this episode
Oh yeah,
a few hours for the recording. I'm like, if you're doing this, I'm going to slay you in recording. I'm going to but then
yeah. We have it connected back to the first episode with, the woman talking about how we had a girl here, but she ran away out into the woods and can't find her right now. And then Geralt remembers what Renfrey told him: the girl in the woods would be your destiny. And he immediately,
yeah.
walks out into the woods, and Ciri comes running up to him, and it ends with her
And then
asking, "Who's Yennefer?"
and
Scene.
you'll find out in 2021.
Yeah.
Bye.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that was season one of The Witcher. So like I said, kind of a mixed bag, but I'm glad I gave this a shot.
Yeah, I think the second season's going to be a lot more structured, right? Because I think the story of Ciri is way more structured in what it follows. And
And
another thing
I
we never
think
mentioned is Ciri's powers, right? We never mentioned that Ciri has these amazing powers that we get to see a few glimpses of here and there, right? We never mentioned that, but that's also another thing that's going on in this,
yeah, because again, there's so much going on in this show, and
which
I
definitely
do,
pulls it down somewhat.
you
It's
know,
just too much to keep up with.
there is something I want to point out actually, because since the next season is going to be in the next season is going to be in 2021.
Hmm.
I'm assuming they have they have like a lot more planned. They
Yeah.
have more time to plan it.
Hmm.
So what I hope is that they'll actually listen to criticism, because from what I've seen, professional criticism about the show is that it's very uh, is very mixed as
Hmm.
well. So I do hope that the longer, just because the next season isn't coming out in the upcoming 2020, that it will actually give them time to see what works, what doesn't, and hopefully give us a more focused season.
Agreed.
And
One thing I definitely think they should take away is try if the remember that these characters don't age, and remember that it's going to be hard to just use background stuff to show a time skip, right? So
Yeah.
try and find some way to be more clear about your time skips. I would hate to see them say, "Hey, this is the time now," and in some like kind of like "Hey, this is the timeline now that we're in." Like I would hate to see them do like some shows and movies do those on-screen subtitles of "This is the year and day we're in the present," and "This is the year and day we're in far in the past," and "This is the year and day we're far in the future." I dislike it when they do that because I feel like always try and find ways to do that within the scenery and the background and the characters, not just tell us, right? But it's going to be harder to do that in this kind of show. And I think they did try, but unfortunately, it fell a little flat. So I think one of their biggest challenges is going to be finding a way to convey that if they do it in the future. If not, if they stay, hey, we're more structured now, we're staying in one particular timeline, and this is where we're staying at, then they won't have that problem. There's nothing to worry about. But in the future, like any takeaway I think you could have from the show is when dealing with characters that don't age and it's hard to show changes in time, try and be creative in how you do that more than what this show might have been. Because as far as I can tell, the big thing they had for changes in time was the change of seasons, which isn't exactly something that is very obvious or very can tell you exactly how much time has changed or that we're years apart or something like that, right? It's not obvious enough. It's a very hard balance to strike, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but regarding the next season, I guess we'll see once we get there.
I'm definitely excited for it. I think there's a lot of characters we could potentially meet within the next season, depending on what they take from the books. That'll be very enjoyable. I think you personally will really love and enjoy a character called Regis. If we get to meet him next season, I think you'll really love and enjoy him.
I'll take your word for it.
But I'm excited for it, and I can't wait to see where they go with it. It's I hope it's enjoyable. I hope they learn from a lot of the mistakes they made from this season, which, to be fair, weren't many. But I think try not to front load everything as much. Try not to be so kind of exposition heavy with everything that we need to know going into this. Try and give people more of that in and tone down some of the things we need to keep up with. Like it's a bit ridiculous to keep up with a war and series powers and Yennefer's backstory and kind of learning about Geralt and his past and his how he wants to deal with everything, and the Ciri's grandmother and Ciri's parents and just all of that. It's really difficult to keep up with at a point.
Mm-hmm.
So try and find ways to tone that down a bit and not do as much of that.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
For the most part, though,
anyway,
an enjoyable show.
Mm-hmm. So this is all for this episode of the Outcast. We hope you enjoyed. What are your thoughts about The Witcher Season 1? Are you happy with it? Are you somewhere in the middle? What do you think about it as a fan or a newcomer? You can tell us all about that in the comment section below, on our Tumblr, which is Bearcast Team, on our Twitter, which is Bearcast with capital C, and yeah, that's it. Until next time, I was HC.
And I've been Wolf.
Toss a coin to your Witcher, and we'll see you later. Take care.
Bye-bye.